Thank you, Lisa. Another big story we're following this morning. The federal government has stepped in to offer payments to workers affected by Victoria's lockdown. Let's bring in the Finance Minister Simon Birmingham from Adelaide. Minister, good morning to you.
Good morning, Michael.
OK, so as this plan works, the Chief Medical Officer of the Commonwealth has to agree, right, on who is subjected to lockdown and who therefore gets these federal payments?
Well, it does require there to be a hotspot in place. Now, we have declared Greater Melbourne a hotspot, so in that sense, those people who are now entering the second week of lockdown would be eligible for this payment. It's about providing a helping hand to the retail workers, the hospitality workers, those who may have been stood down or had their hours reduced to zero, who need that helping hand to get them through these next few days.
OK, but what, for argument's sake, as has been the case in Victoria, regional Victorians are subjected to restrictions, lose their jobs as well. They wouldn't get the money under that current threshold.
So regional Victoria is not going into the second week of lockdown, but yes, we have put a definition in place there, just as you would expect in terms of the prudent use of federal money, of funds from all Australians. So there's got to be legitimate reasons for why there are restrictions in place, and using the hotspot is appropriate. But our health officials have always been pragmatic and practical there in terms of the application of that hotspot definition, and that's why those facing the second week in Melbourne can have the confidence that a bit of assistance is on the way for those who need it.
OK, well, and what do you make of this reclassification of those cases overnight to false positives? Do you hope that increases pressure on health authorities in Victoria, certainly the state government, to have another look at this second week?
Look, there's more than 50,000 tests that have been undertaken a day in recent times. That's fantastic news, and continue to encourage Victorians and especially Melburnians to get out and get tested. Now, these couple of false positives do obviously present reason for health officials to re-evaluate, but their re-evaluation will be informed by yesterday's test results and what other new positives may exist. If there's a chance to be able to ease some of those restrictions, to perhaps narrow the scope of the lockdown, to maybe get some people back to work sooner or some kids back to school sooner, then I'm sure that would be welcomed, but it's got to be informed by that health advice, and no doubt they'll be looking closely at that.
The Prime Minister made a point of mentioning what he called retrospective compliance activity that's attached to these federal payments. What is that?
Michael, as always, with payments that we make through the federal system, you want to make sure that those who are claiming them are eligible for them. And so there will be the potential for audits or checks simply to make sure that people who are out there working in any event, knowing that many parts of the economy do continue still to function, aren't also just going and making these claims.
So it's to ensure taxpayers' money isn't misused.
Just ensuring help. Well, that's right, as always. But the payments are there to help those who need it. We're taking them through the National Cabinet process today because it's about putting in place a consistent national framework so that right across the country people can have confidence if there's a repeat of what's happening in Melbourne, these sorts of systems will kick into gear.
Where's the retrospective compliance activity for Harvey Norman and other companies who received all those millions of dollars in JobKeeper, made huge profits, paid executive bonuses, and are refusing to hand that taxpayer money back to the government?
Michael, they acted within the laws as they were established at the time. We have to go back all the way to March of last year when we developed the JobKeeper program at that stage. And at that point, it was about expected downturns in relation to trade and the potential for lockdowns.
Excuse the interruption. Do you believe it's right
across the nation?
Do you believe it's right? Do you believe it's morally right that these big companies, billionaires like Jerry Harvey, are not handing back this taxpayer money?
Okay. Many companies are voluntarily paying some money back. We welcome that where it's appropriate.
Well, let's talk about Harvey Norman in particular. That's attracted a lot of attention. Do you believe Jerry Harvey should put his hand into his very deep pockets and hand back these millions of taxpayers' money, dollars, given the fact that Harvey Norman made huge profits during the pandemic?
Look, I think companies who are in a position to pay some of the money back ought to look at doing so where indeed they did benefit out of the overall situation that occurred.
OK, so that's their words.
Is an individual company proposition. The Commonwealth law is as was passed by the Parliament. We're not going to go back and change the rules for not only every big business but also every small business. Many sole traders, small businesses claimed JobKeeper as well, and ultimately was there to provide confidence at a time of enormous uncertainty when we were looking at a nationwide lockdown to keep people employed. It worked. It worked overwhelmingly in terms of putting Australia in a position where we now have more people employed than was the case pre-pandemic.
Can you see the disconnect? Can you see the disconnect if the federal government chases low-paid workers, casual workers, under this retrospective compliance activity for those taxpayers' dollars, and is still doing nothing about those big companies?
We don't go back and change the laws after they've been passed. So we're not going to go back and go after businesses, be they small ones or big ones, who claimed funds that they were under the law at the time entitled to. I understand the argument that you're making, Michael.
Well, do you think it's right? Let's take off your finance minister's cap. As a person, as a taxpayer yourself, do you think what Harvey Norman is doing and these other companies is morally right?
Many of these companies are now paying and employing more Australians. They've paid dividends to shareholders.
But that wasn't the question, Minister. I'm asking whether you think it's morally. Do you think it's morally right?
Michael, I said before that companies who are in a position to do so will welcome them making those repayments, and a number are doing so. So I've made that clear. But what we are doing right now is, as we've done right throughout the pandemic, respond to the changed circumstances. We're having the first case of an extended lockdown, giving a helping hand to Australians who need it there. And we're not about to be undertaking heavy-handed compliance activities, but indeed there will be compliance activities associated with JobKeeper too. There are, in the fact that we make sure that businesses claiming that were doing so within the law as it was passed by the Parliament at the time.
We're nearly out of time, Minister. I want to ask you about the purpose-built quarantine facility proposed for near Melbourne, the federal government coming on board. How much will the federal government pay towards this project?
Well, we're still getting costings through in that regard, so it will be some hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of
the federal government. Sorry, the state government's asked for $200 billion. Will you provide $200 million?
So the memorandum of understanding that we've provided to the state government is broadly in accordance with what they had asked for, and that is that we will fund the construction of the facility, and the Victorian government will operate the facility, creating additional quarantine places in their system. So yes, it will run to some hundreds of millions of dollars. There's an expression of interest process underway at present for us to be able to get more detailed costings to enable us to move forward on that.
OK, Minister, I know you've got to go. Thank you so much for giving us the time this morning.
Thank you, Michael. My pleasure.